Hello, Witch Talk and Blessed Be. We're gonna have a little conversation in regards to animal sacrifice. I made a recent video that ended up ruffling some feathers, so I want to give a little bit of a surface level conversation in regards to the practice of animal sacrifice and the historical importance and roots that it has in magic overall outside of witchcraft, but spirituality, different cultures, and different traditions. Also, don't mind my eye. Right before I started this video, I stabbed my freaking eye, so it's just mad at me. This may come as a shocker to the Western world, specifically the US, but animal sacrifice is something that has been incorporated in many cultures and traditions all across the world. Many religions, many spiritual practices, and so on and so forth. And a lot of people don't talk about it enough because it is considered controversial and they're afraid of being attacked for it. But here's the thing is I'm just going to lay it out on the table because I don't care whether or not you don't like me. Because regardless of your emotions, I think education is really important, especially on this app, since y'all love to demonize things that you don't understand. And I want you guys to tread lightly when it comes to making such bold assumptions, because you don't understand that when you demonize such practices, you are demonizing a lot of roots from POC cultures and traditions. Practices that have been around way longer than you've been alive. Practices that have been around way before the colonization of America. Animal sacrifice has such deep historical roots and such important ties to magic beyond anyone's comprehension. And there's a lot of people in my comment sections that are really upset about it and, consider it to be animal abuse and consider it to be cruel and unnecessary. And as much as that may come from a place of good intention, it is rooted in ignorance. And I do think it's a conversation that this app is not exactly ready for, but I'm gonna have it anyways. Because the same people who attack me for it are the same people who are against eating dogs, and that is very common outside of the US. And it's very much a double standard, such as demonizing the eating of dogs when you have a steak on your plate. There's no difference in that whatsoever. Whether you guys like it or not, animal sacrifice is a very, very common practice that stems from people of color, traditions, and culture. Practices such as Santeria and many other ATR type practices. It is also very common in brujeria. And even though I might not be the best voice for this, given the color of my skin, I want to use my platform to bring more awareness to the harmful impact that comes from demonizing such practices. Because I also don't think that you guys necessarily understand what animal sacrifice is as a whole. A lot of y'all think that it incorporates torturing animals, which for the most part, it very much doesn't. Because a lot of the times, these sacrifices that are made are also then prepared on a plate, just like the meat that is in your grocery stores that you use to feed your family. In fact, these victims of sacrifices are typically raised with so much more love and care and nurture than those hamburgers had ever experienced in their life. There's even a lot of practices where you're supposed to raise these animals on your own, for instance, a chicken. And you're supposed to raise it with feeding it high quality food. You're supposed to raise it with lots of love and nurture and care because that's an important part of it, to bring up the best quality of life as possible. Because it actually creates a more significant impact for the actual sacrifice in itself. Because it is a higher quality being, and it's not just the actual act of sacrifice that is participated in the practice. A lot of the time, it's also the raising of these animals and the caring for these animals and treating these beings with respect. And like I said, that's not always the case, but most of the time it is. So when you guys hear animal sacrifice, y'all get all freaked out for nothing. Because like I said, all the food that y'all eat is literally way more neglected and tortured, way more than any of these sacrifices will ever have experienced. Not only that, but most of the time, these sacrifices have way less waste than the actual animals that you guys have prepared on your plate. A lot of these practices try to stretch and get as much out of the remains of these animals as possible, such as incorporating the feathers for other working, eating the meat, utilizing leftover remains for fertilizer for plants, or other workings, or offerings. A lot of the time, it's just the life itself that was given to a higher power or whatever when the life is taken, and then the remains of that is put on a plate to feed their family, just like y'all do. Just like a farm. Actually, a lot of the time, these people live on farms. And if not, they typically get it from local farmers. So a lot of y'all hear the terminology of animal sacrifice and you think that these animals are being like electrocuted to death or some shit. When a lot of the time, these animals are raised to be more pampered than your average dog and cat in your household. Because a lot of the time, and not always, but a lot of the time, that is very, very, very important when it comes to the quality of what animal you are sacrificing. There's a lot of fear-mongering that comes with Western ideology in regards to animal sacrifice as a whole. And while it may be rooted in ignorance, the demonization of this practice is also demonizing all of these cultures and traditions that y'all don't understand because you live in a society in which is influenced by whitewashing and limited belief structure, and it's something new to you. You don't hear it. And when people don't understand something, it creates a fear response in their brain and it causes them to lash out and think they know everything, and that's definitely not the case. And that's exactly why I said in the video that I did that some of y'all aren't ready for real magic. Because you don't truly understand the roots of where your magic comes from. The original magic wasn't burning rosemary. Original magic wasn't chanting from a book. Where do you think the information that you guys have came from? The practices that you practice, where do you think they originated from? Because it wasn't no love and light Wiccan bullshit. And I want to touch on the part where people say it's unnecessary. Even though you can use that same argument with eating meat as a whole, even though, like I said, most of the time we eat our sacrifices, so I don't understand what the big deal is there. There are times in certain practices or in certain situations where it is necessary and there is no way to go around it, such as breaking certain curses that are connected to your bloodline. There is literally certain curses that can be placed on you that are life or death situations for you or your family or your bloodline. And the only way to get out of that is to sacrifice certain animals because of certain practices. And I can't exactly go into detail about that because literally almost all of them are closed practices. And there is times that a life has to be taken in order to save another life. And I know that that's hard for y'all to stomach because you don't like the sound of it, but it is reality. And y'all have that little gateway argument of, well, what if I'm vegan or vegetarian and I don't eat meat? That still doesn't give you the right to demonize other people's practices and cultures simply because your lifestyle is different. You don't get to demonize other people's lifestyles and say that they're bad people because you don't do what they do. And y'all don't understand that the vegans that are in my chats, in my comment section, shaming people or shaming anyone else for simply eating meat is also rooted in Western colonization. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to be vegan or vegetarian. If that's what you want to do and that's what works for you, that's amazing. Just don't project that onto other people like a judgmental Christian. Because you simply come from a different world and your society has isolated you from the cultural diversity of the rest of the world. So I advise you guys that before you try to shame someone out of ignorance or fearmonger because of something that you don't understand or paint someone out to be an animal abuser, take into consideration that you might just be uneducated and you might not know what you're talking about. Because like I said, a lot of these times, like for instance, chickens, they don't feel the sacrifice. They are beheaded in literally a second and they don't feel anything and it's done and over with. So even if they are not used for dinner, they are still suffering a lot less than any of the cows that you're buying from fast food places. Big corporation farming neglects and tortures their animals and they are raised from birth in very unethical environments. If y'all want to be mad about animal abuse and animal neglect and cruelty, go argue in their comment sections. Not the people who raise and pamper and love and nurture and feed the most high quality food possible into animals that are never gonna know that they were meant to be a sacrifice because they were treated with so much love and care. So no, I'm not an animal abuser. I'm a farmer and I'm a witch. and I acknowledge the roots of magic and embrace them. And I hope that one day you will be able to do that as well, even if you don't participate in it yourself. Anyways, I'm going to have a deeper dive in this conversation regarding animal sacrifice on my Patreon, and that video will be uploaded tomorrow. So if you're more curious about this topic, feel free to subscribe on there. It'll be available on all tiers. I'll see you guys next time.